A wine glass tipped on the table. A body went limp. And the doorbell rang at exactly the right moment. That's how last year's Thanksgiving ended in the house I thought would always be my refuge. It sounds like the opening line of a crime movie, but it all began with a conversation I should never have heard, and a sentence from my son that stopped me cold. After Thanksgiving, he won't make it through the day. My name is Henry Collins. I'm 68, a retired Air Force pilot, a widower. I live alone in the $780,000 house Elena and I paid for piece by piece over 30 years. My son Ethan used to be the pride of my life. Until he and his wife Tara decided to turn Thanksgiving, the family day, into the day I was supposed to disappear. Before I tell you what happened after that glass of wine, tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout, that it only needs the right moment to strike back. Hit like and subscribe. September 20th, 2024. Bend, Oregon. It was a late afternoon light that made everything look softer, like the clouds were being held back by the calm of autumn itself. I'd just come back from a long shopping trip, getting a head start on Thanksgiving, a turkey, cranberries, a few bottles of red wine, the ones Elena always picked out. She's been gone 8 years, and I still keep the habit. Maybe because it makes this house feel less empty. I set the bags on the kitchen counter. Across the room, the tiny red light on the landline was blinking voicemail. 3 missed calls, 1 from the pharmacy, 1 from an old friend wishing happy birthday, and 1 with no caller ID. I pressed play. A small click. Then Ethan's voice. Calm, cold, even like he was reciting a meeting note, not plotting the life of his own father. After Thanksgiving, he won't make it through the day. A silence. Then Tara's voice sliding in smooth and precise, that $780,000 house will be ours. Sell it, pay the debts, and move to West Hills. The message ended with the metallic clink of something like a safe opening. Then a whisper of breath and a short, sharp laugh. I stood there in the kitchen, a bread knife in my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt my hands steady instead of shaking. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because my mind began lining up the sounds, slotting them into shape, analyzing them the way you do on reconnaissance. In the Air Force, we were taught when something's off, don't react, observe. So I did. I replayed the message. Once, twice, 3 times. Each line landed like a projectile. I sat down looking out the window. Outside, the old pines swayed the distant lake, catching the pale sunset. That peace, the kind I'd imagined as a reward after a life of service, now felt like a thin curtain hiding something about to explode. I pulled out my cell. A text from Mark Johnson, a friend I'd served with at Yokota in Japan. Henry, someone called the records office asking about your military file and retirement benefits. Thought you should know. I stopped cold. Not many people know I carry a retirement plan worth north of $320,000. Ethan does. Tara does. I stared at the dark screen. My face reflected their older, mapped with lines, but the eyes were the same, awake, cool, calculating the look I had the day I left the cockpit. That night, the wind rose. The pine branches scraped together like dry fan blades. I sat in the living room with all the lights off the desk lamp, casting a weak yellow over Elena's framed photo. I remembered the first time Ethan brought Tara home. She'd bowed politely, hands trembling, eyes gentle. Now that voice was colder than an Alaska night. A car stopped down the street, snapping me back. A black SUV idled across the way. A man in a suit stepped out, leaned on the hood, clipboard in hand. He looked around the neighborhood, then fixed his gaze on my gate. Nothing obvious about him, no cigarette, No phone call, just standing there waiting. I killed the porch light. Darkness swallowed the house. 1 minute. 2 minutes. I snapped the light back on. He startled, turned, climbed into the SUV, and sped away. As it rounded the corner, I caught the faint lettering on the driver's door, Jason Miller, real estate consultant. A realtor. I'd never called for an appraisal. I booted up the computer and typed his name. On the third line of the search results, a public email appeared. Jason Miller at West Hills Realty. Comrade West Hills, the same neighborhood Tara named in that voicemail. I leaned back in my chair. My world, the quiet, simple world I'd kept, shifted by a millimeter. In war, tiny changes are often the first signal of catastrophe. I stepped onto the porch. The yard was misted with cool fog. The house sat quietly, the wind moving along the eaves. Somewhere deep inside, I heard my old voice over the internal radio flying over the Pacific. Maintain altitude. Stay silent. Wait for the signal. I knew I was about to enter another kind of fight. No bombs, no flak, just words, trust, and a plot swelling behind the walls of my own home. That night, I opened the safe. I checked every paper, pension statements, the deed insurance policies, old wills. Everything was there. I snapped the lock closed and heard the same dry click that echoed in the voicemail. Identical. Impossible to mistake. I sat down and breathed in slow, even breaths. The military taught me one thing bluntly: the most dangerous enemy is the one who believes you won't fight back. That night, I made a promise to myself. If my son truly intended to take away everything Elena and I had built over a lifetime, he would have to learn one more lesson. No one underestimates a soldier and gets away with it. From that night on, I chose silence. Not out of fear, but because silence is the only way to hear everything clearly. In the Air Force, they taught us when the enemy believes you won't react, that's when you see everything. I'd survived by that rule before, and I would again. 3 days after the strange voicemail, Ethan and Tara came by. I made coffee, pretending nothing was wrong. They brought a gift bag and those perfect smiles, the kind you practice for family gatherings or to hide something. Tara glanced around the living room, her gaze landing on the framed wedding photo of Elena and me. She smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. Still keeping everything the same, huh? Maybe it's time for a little change. A new coat of paint could really boost the price of this place. I took a slow sip of coffee. I'm not planning to sell, I said. This house has always been more than walls and a roof. Ethan chuckled softly, changed the subject. We spent the rest of the morning talking about meaningless things, whether gas prices work. But beneath every word I could feel it distance. Not the kind between father and son, but between prey and predator. The next morning my car keys were gone. I was certain I'd left them on the hook by the kitchen door. I always did for the past 10 years. I searched everywhere, even emptied the pockets of my jackets. Then Tara walked in holding the keys. Found them in the fridge, she said lightly. You must have forgotten again. The fridge, I stared at her. She smiled, voice gentle but sharp around the edges. You're probably just tired. Happens at your age, right? Her tone wasn't concern. It was a test, and I knew it. I nodded once, saying nothing. That night I opened my notebook and wrote the first entry, September 25th. Tara hid the keys, testing my reaction. Didn't respond. Observe only. 3 days later, Ethan brought a small box. Dad, I got you this, he said. A smartwatch tracks your heart rate, sleep cycles, even sends an alert if you fall. He said it like a loving son would. The glass face gleamed, the silver band catching the light like something pure. I tried it on, nodded. Nice. Thanks. They left soon after. When I took the watch off to charge it, I noticed a tiny icon glowing in the corner, location sharing active. One tap, and there it was. Linked account taracollins@icloud.com. I called Barbara Lindstrom, an elder law attorney I'd worked with years ago. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "If they're tracking you, don't remove it. Pretend you don't know, I'll check something on my end." So I wore the watch every day, my invisible snare. Barbara ran a background trace. The iCloud account was pinging my address every 6 hours. They were watching me in real time. A week later, I got a call from a man claiming to be from Wells Fargo. "Mr. Collins," he said, "we're confirming the $250,000 home equity loan, awaiting approval." I froze. "What loan?" "The application came from your account. West Hills branch filed October 2nd. We just need your verbal confirmation." "I've never set foot in that branch," I said evenly. There was a pause. Then the line went dead. I called Wells Fargo directly. No loan on record. But under login activity, there were 3 failed attempts from an unfamiliar device in Portland where Ethan lived. This wasn't a game anymore. That night, I began keeping a full log. Every day, every action, every word, every look. A soldier documents before he moves because memory can lie, but paper doesn't. I photographed utility bills, phone statements, bank slips, anything with my name. I kept a copy of my credit card statements too, in case someone decided to borrow my identity. All of it went on a small flash drive hidden behind Elena's photo frame. Over the next few days, Tara started dropping by more often. She said Ethan was busy, so she wanted to help declutter the old stuff. Each time she opened drawers, rearranged things, took small items away. One afternoon, I caught her taking a photo of the property deed. She flinched when I stepped into the room, forcing a laugh. "Oh, I was just curious where you got this done. Ethan and I are thinking about buying a condo, and I wanted to check the format." I smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I keep this safe. It's harder to copy than you think." That night, I brewed coffee and sat on the porch. The Bend air was cool and dry, the late September wind brushing the wind chimes softly. I thought about my Air Force days, how they trained us to notice danger in the smallest patterns, a blink, a footstep, a shift in tone. Now every gesture from Ethan and Tara carried that same coded rhythm, the rhythm of a plan. And I, who once flew through storms, could smell another one coming. Only this time the battlefield was my own family. On October 2nd, I received an email. "Security alert, unrecognized login iPhone, Portland, OR." I printed it, slipped it into the logbook. Each page now looked like part of an intelligence report. I didn't know when I'd need them, but I knew one day they'd save me. That night I sat in the dark. The smartwatch screen glowed faintly on my wrist, its light reflecting on Elena's glass frame. I whispered almost to her, "You see that, don't you? They're testing how weak I've become. But I'm still here. Still watching." I tightened my grip on the mug, breathing steady, and wrote the day's final line. "I've flown through storms and lived to tell it. Now I just need to know which way the wind is turning." The phone on the table buzzed. Unknown number. One text. No name. "You should be careful who's been moving around your house." I looked around. The house was silent, too silent. The only sound left was my heartbeat, steady and unshaken. And in that moment I understood the game had officially begun. There are moments when you realize you can't fight alone anymore. Not because you're weak, but because you finally understand your enemies don't carry guns. They carry papers, laws, and smiles. October 6, 2024, Portland, Oregon. The morning was gray and damp, the air smelling faintly of rain and dying leaves. Rows of maple trees along Burnside had turned copper red, their leaves drifting down like the ashes of something that once burned too bright. I drove 2 hours from Bend to the city. In the trunk sat my notebook, every entry from the past few weeks, actions, words, small details, all of it documented like mission reports. This wasn't something I could handle alone anymore. I needed someone who understood laws better than I understood tactics. Her name was Barbara Lindstrom, elder law attorney, 61, short silver hair, a voice deep and steady, the kind of voice that's carried arguments through 1,000 courtrooms. Her eyes, sharp, calculating, belonged to someone who'd been at war with systems her entire life. She was a widow almost 10 years now. I could tell by the way her fingers brushed the wedding ring she no longer wore, only the chain that held it close to her heart. When I placed my notebook on her desk, she stared at it for a long moment, before saying quietly, "I've seen seniors lose their homes, their savings, their lives, forced to sign papers they didn't understand. But I've rarely seen someone this calm, this prepared." I answered slowly. "I've flown through storms, Ms. Lindstrom. Wind doesn't scare me. But betrayal from someone you raised, that's the kind of turbulence I never learned to land through." She didn't smile, just sat in silence for a moment, then opened her laptop and started typing. First she said, "We close every door they could use. You have the original deed." "In my safe," I nodded. "Good. I'll file a title update. No one can touch the property without your signature. Next, change your online banking passwords. Remove every shared access. And," she paused, looking up, "we'll create a backup trust. If the worst happens, the house transfers automatically to a third party. Not your son, not your daughter-in-law. A foundation independent and untouchable." I raised an eyebrow. "A charity?" She nodded. "Exactly. An educational or veterans foundation. That way you keep a lifetime living right, but the asset stays beyond their reach." I gave a quiet laugh, not from humor, but from disbelief at her bluntness. "You're practical." "I lost someone once because family pressured him into selling everything," she said simply. "Since then, I stopped trusting love where paperwork still has blank spaces." We worked all morning. She reviewed every statement, every suspicious email, every line of my notes. She highlighted, underlined, annotated with red pen, like a teacher grading an assignment that couldn't afford a single mistake. "This is motive. This is proof. If they're trying to claim you're mentally unfit, we'll need a psychological evaluation from someone credible at the VA. I know a good doctor." I looked up. "You don't think I'm losing my mind?" She met my eyes and said quietly, "I think you're dangerously lucid." For some reason, that line made me breathe easier than anything else that day. At lunch, she brewed tea and poured it into an old porcelain cup. On the wall behind her hung her law degree and a photograph, her and her husband, years younger, him in a Navy uniform. "He was military?" I asked. She nodded. "Iraq. He came home with more ghosts than I could fight." After that, I switched to elder law. Fewer explosions, same battlefield. We both fell silent. Two widowed soldiers in different wars sharing the same kind of heavy quiet. By afternoon, Barbara had assembled the full file power of attorney updates, trust papers, a checklist of everything I needed to secure by week's end. As she handed me the stack, she said, "You know, most older clients fear being scammed by strangers. But what takes everything from them isn't lack of caution. It's the belief their family would never do it." I nodded slowly. "Trust has an expiration date, Ms. Lindstrom. I just wish I'd read mine sooner." She smiled faintly, not pity but recognition, the kind of smile shared between people who understand each other's scars. As I turned to leave, I asked, if things go too far, should I call the police? She looked at me for a long time, then asked back, do you think they've already started? I do. Then let them believe you don't know. I grinned just a little. In the Air Force, we don't call for backup just because we hear thunder. She let out a short, dry laugh. I think I like that about you. It was raining when I drove home. The drops hit the windshield like tiny drums, blurring the city lights into ribbons of gray and gold. I turned on the radio, but the noise felt wrong, so I shut it off. Silence has a way of helping you think. Barbara's face stayed in my mind, calm, precise, but with that same flicker I'd seen in myself years ago, when one decision had changed everything. When I finally reached Bend, it was after 9. The house was dark, except for the hallway light reflecting on the hardwood floor. On the kitchen counter sat the note I'd left that morning, buy bread, call the bank. But beside it was something new, my car keys, placed neatly, even though I remembered clearly I'd had them in my pocket when I left. I sat down, staring at the keys glinting under the light. A chill crawled up my spine. They'd been inside the house. No forced entry. No mess. Just a message subtle and cruel, I see you. I can come and go, and I'm not afraid of you knowing it. I locked the doors, drew the curtains. Outside, Bend drowned in rain. Inside, the clock ticked slow, metallic, indifferent. I opened the notebook and wrote October 6th. Met Barbara. She understands. They've been inside the house. This is no longer theory. It's war. As soon as I put the pen down, my phone vibrated. Unknown number, one text, heard you met a lawyer. Don't do something you'll regret. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then deleted it. Steady breath. Calm heart. I looked up at Elena's photo again and whispered, they've started love. But this time, I'm not alone. When a man who's flown through war says he hears something strange in the silence, it usually means a storm is coming. After meeting with Barbara, I went back to my old habits, checking everything as if preparing for reconnaissance. Locks, windows, alarms, wiring. Every detail went into the notebook neat as a pre-flight report. The next morning, someone knocked. A familiar raspy voice called out warm despite the weather. Henry. It's me, Marjorie Lane. Mrs. Marjorie lived across the street. 72, her husband Paul had been a Navy engineer before cancer took him a few years back. She still carried herself with that quiet discipline. Military wives never lose silver hair, pinned tight cardigan, buttoned stainless steel thermos in hand. I opened the door and she waved a newspaper. Did you see this break-ins last week? An old man let someone in at night, lost all his electronics. The headline said North Bend burglary spree, just a few blocks away. She set the paper down. You live alone. You should have cameras. My grandson's in tech, he could help. I started to refuse, but the look in her eyes gave me something I'd been needing, a reason to do what I was already planning. That's a good idea, I said, but I can handle the installation. Maybe you can help me choose the angles. She smiled. Then I'll be your spotter. That afternoon, we mounted 3 cameras, one over the porch, one by the garage, one on the back fence. I hid a small microphone inside the wind chime, the one Tara once called too old-fashioned. It recorded sound better than any phone. When I linked the cameras to my laptop, the feed came alive, crisp enough to see dry leaves floating past the storm drain. Marjorie crossed her arms, watching. I like people who prepare before things fall apart. I nodded. In the Air Force, we call that proactive defense. She chuckled softly. Then let's hope you never have to use it. A week later, the rain returned, the kind Bend wears like a second skin. I was in the living room reviewing footage when Tara appeared in one of the clips from 2 days earlier, standing on my porch, looking around. She didn't ring the bell. She just stared at the upper corner where the camera sat, then walked away. I replayed it zoomed in. Her eyes weren't looking at the door. They were looking straight into the lens. That night, the power went out. No warning. No thunder. No rain. Everything died in an instant. The wall clock still glowed faintly. 7 p.m. I stayed still, counting heartbeats. 9 minutes passed before the lights flickered back. I went straight to the laptop. 3 feeds, all black. The last recorded frame ended at 9:01. No data after that. No system error. No disconnect alert. Just blank silence. Outside, the air cut sharp against my face. The porch camera light was on, but the memory card slot was empty. I put on gloves and shone the flashlight scratches on the plastic edge, faint fingerprints, small, narrow. Female, no doubt. The next morning, I brought a spare card across to Marjorie's. She was watering her plants. When I told her what happened, she set the can down slowly, eyes tightening, the look of someone who'd seen more ugliness than she ever expected to. "Henry," she said quietly, "if they want your house, they'll do anything. Cut power, wipe cameras, pretend to care. This isn't petty theft. These are people who know exactly who you are." I asked, "You've been through this?" She nodded, gaze drifting somewhere far. "Last year, my cousin's son tricked her into signing over her house, told her it was for tax protection. 3 months later, she was out on the street. Law's a tool, Henry. Depends on who's holding it." I didn't answer. She turned to me again, voice low, firm. "You don't have to be polite to the people digging your grave." That night, I rebuilt the whole system. New cards. Hidden cloud backup with a private channel only I knew. Every 12 hours, data uploaded automatically off-site. When it was done, I stood on the porch, looking across at Marjorie's kitchen window. Her light was on. She was making tea. She turned, caught my eye, and lifted her hand in a tired little wave. "A wordless message, I see you. I'm on your side." The next night was dry and still, the air thick like the cockpit silence before a night flight. I sat in front of the monitors, scrolling through new footage. 9:15 p.m., a figure approached the porch. Hood up. Didn't look at the camera. Bent down to the mailbox, slipped something inside, and walked away. I paused, the frame zoomed in. A paper in his hand. Across the top, even through the grain, I could read the words, "Notice of Property Evaluation, West Hills Realty." I exhaled slowly. No more guessing. They'd moved to the next phase appraisal. Preparation for sale. The next morning, I called Barbara and told her briefly. She said in her calm, clipped voice, "Don't remove the cameras. Let them think you're unaware. When they slip, we'll have evidence." "What kind of slip?" I asked. "Greed," she said. "It always leaves fingerprints." By dusk, the whole street glowed bronze in the bend sunset. The wind chime microphone tinkled softly above me. I leaned against the porch post, eyes fixed on the house across the road, Ethan and Tara's place. Quiet still. But I knew better. Inside that silence, a plan was being drafted, line by line. I took a sip of coffee, and the voice in my head came back, the old rhythm of mission reports from a cockpit radio target in motion. "Do not engage. Await signal." I turned back inside and replayed the older files. Everything was intact except one. October 10th. Video empty. But the audio track held 2 seconds of sound. A breath. Then a whisper, soft, deliberate, like someone leaving a calling card. "You can't hide forever, Henry. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat slow but heavy. Someone hadn't just been near the yard. They'd stood right at my door, and they wanted me to know it. When I served in the Air Force, they used to say, "There's no enemy more dangerous than the one who knows your password." I never thought those words would come true right inside my own house. October 14th, 2024. Bend, Oregon. The cold came early that year. Low gray clouds pressed down the sky the color of steel before lightning strikes. I was fixing the garage hinge when I heard a truck pull up. An old Ford Ranger. The man who stepped out wasn't Ethan. It was Derek Fields, his college friend. He smiled, reached out for a handshake, too casual, too friendly. "Long time, Mr. Collins. Ethan told me to drop by check on you. How are you holding up?" I squinted, studying him. "Fine. Why didn't Ethan come himself?" He hesitated, the smile flickering. "Well, he said you've been forgetful. Sometimes a little confused. He's planning to file for guardianship, just to make sure you're taken care of." The pliers in my hand creaked under my grip. I forced a smile cold as the tools on my bench, thoughtful of him. When Derek left, I sat alone in the office, staring at the wall. Guardianship. The word echoed like a warning siren. In the military, guardianship means losing command. In civilian life, it means losing everything. I called Barbara. Her voice was low, steady, serious. "If they get a doctor's statement saying you're not mentally competent, the court can appoint Ethan as your guardian. That gives him control over your assets. The house accounts, retirement, everything. All that I asked with one piece of paper." "One piece of paper," she said. "One doctor's signature. One clever story. If we don't intercept it, they can make it legal theft." I tightened my hand around the phone. "Almost $1 million worth, and they think I'll just watch it happen." Barbara replied softly. "No. But if you want to win, stay calm. Don't confront them. Don't touch anything. Let them expose themselves." From that night, I began installing hidden microphones, small as coins tucked inside wall outlets. One in the living room, Tara's favorite spot for phone calls, Ethan's for talking business. I played the part of the forgetful father, quiet, harmless. The less I spoke, the bolder they became. And for me, every careless word was ammunition. October 17th. Around 8:30 p.m., I was in my study when the recorder pinged conversation detected. Tara's voice soft, distinct. "All you need is the doctor's note, Ethan. After that, this $780,000 house is ours. We sell it, pay the debts, and move to West Hills, somewhere worth living." Ethan answered, tone cautious but trembling with excitement. "I'm talking to a doctor from the insurance firm. If Dad slips on a few memory questions, they'll mark it as cognitive decline. Then I file for guardianship. It's all legal. No one will ever question it." I listened. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. This wasn't family conflict anymore. It was a coordinated operation. I saved the file, labeled it with date and time. October 17th, 2033. First evidence. They crossed the line between blood and betrayal. The next morning I called Barbara. My voice steady but weighted. "I have it. Clear audio." She was silent for a moment. "Don't send it online. Bring a copy to me in person. And Henry, don't let them know you recorded anything. If they suspect, they'll change tactics. I know I said, in war, the enemy's only dangerous when they realize you're watching." That afternoon, I met Barbara at her office. She put on her reading glasses, listened to the recording in full. When it ended, she took the glasses off, folded them carefully, and said, "This isn't just fraud, It's organized criminal intent. If you approve, I'll contact a detective at Portland PD, but we need proof they've already filed the petition. And if they have, I asked, I'll stop it in court, but we'll need to prove you're fully competent. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. You planning a psychological evaluation? Yes. And you'll pass. I've met combat vets who handle trauma better than people who call themselves normal. That night I drove back through the rain. The streetlights smeared red across the windshield like veins. As I turned onto my block, I saw a figure standing under a porch across the road. Rain dripped from his shoulders. He didn't move. I slowed down. He turned away, climbed into a black SUV. The plate was blurred by rain, but I recognized the stance. Derek Fields. I didn't need confirmation. Ethan had sent him. Inside, I brewed coffee and checked the recorder. Everything was still functioning. But at the end of the previous night's log, there was a new sound, a faint click like metal brushing metal. Then Tara's whisper. "You're sure he suspects nothing?" Ethan's voice answered. Calm, smug, "Trust me. Dad believes so much. One day he'll sign the papers himself." I stopped the playback, looked up at Elena's photo on the wall, her gentle face frozen in a smile that once steadied me through worse days. I murmured, "You used to say a war ends when people stop trusting each other. Maybe you were right. But I still have one weapon left, truth." 2 days later, Barbara texted, "Confirmed Ethan, just filed for temporary guardianship in Deschutes County. Hearing set for end of the month." My chest tightened. Cold, sharp clarity. I knew now no bullet could save me. Only a plan and time. I opened the notebook and wrote the final line for the night. "They want the court to think I've lost my mind. Fine. I'll let them believe it until the day the judge sees who's really sane." There are mornings when the house is so still I can hear the clock sweep through each second. A different kind of silence, not peace but waiting. I know the storm hasn't arrived yet, but it's coming. October 19th, 2024. Rain had fallen all night in Bend. The porch boards were slick with dull puddles, and the coffee maker in the kitchen hummed faintly, breathing like an old man. I sat at the table, morning light stretching across the folder Barbara had sent the night before. A thick stack neatly clipped labeled in bold on the first page, "Petition for temporary guardianship, Ethan Collins versus Henry Collins." Below that one number, total assets $984,200. $1 million, my entire life condensed into a few lines and signatures. I closed the file gently and set it aside. Next to it was the photo frame of Elena, her smile still soft, the kind that once kept the whole world steady. And in the drawer below it, I knew what waited there. A pale blue envelope frayed at the edges, ink faded but familiar. Her handwriting slanted and graceful. "Henry, for the day you forget who you are." I opened it. The scent of old paper mingled with lavender, the one she used to spray in our closet. "My dear Henry, if one day the world makes you doubt yourself, remember. You once knew how to take off. Don't let fear keep you grounded. You've survived storms, bullets, and worse things than loneliness. So don't let anyone make you forget who you are." I read slowly, each line hitting deeper than the last. "This house isn't just shelter, Henry. It's a promise. If I'm not there to remind you, look up. Every time you see a plane, believe I'm flying beside you." I folded the letter and slid it back into her frame. That's when I heard it, a faint buzzing outside the window. At first I thought it was a child's toy, but the sound rose higher, steadier, hovering right above the porch. A drone. Not the cheap kind. The sound was too even, too controlled, a professional model 3-axis gimbal 20-minute flight time. Not everyone knows how to fly those. I stepped outside. Rain tapped against my jacket, cold and deliberate. The drone hovered less than 15 feet away, circling the roof slowly, its red light blinking in rhythm. For a moment, my chest clenched. That sound, it was the same pitch as the UAVs I heard over Kandahar 2003. The metallic whine, the smell of ozone, voices screaming through static. "Hold steady, Collins. You know how to take off. You can damn well land," the flashback hit fast. Dust light the roar of turbines and chaos. I shut my eyes, breathing deep once, twice. When I opened them again, the drone was gone. Only the sound of rain remained. But the war had just been reactivated. I went back inside, wiped my face, looked around the living room. Every wall, every scratch, every brick, Elena and I had built it together. 30 years of skipped meals, double shifts, sleepless nights, all for this roof. And now my only son wanted to take it away by calling me incompetent. I whispered steady and low, "No one takes the house we paid for 1 month, one sacrifice at a time." At noon, I called Barbara and told her about the drone. She listened quiet, then said evenly, "They're building a case. If they capture you yelling or reacting aggressively, they'll use the footage as proof of emotional instability." I let out a short, dry laugh. Then they picked the wrong man. I've lived long enough to control fear, not the other way around. She hesitated before answering softly. "I believe you, Henry. But they won't stop. If they can't win with paperwork, they'll win with emotions." By evening, the sky cleared, but the air still smelled of ozone. I stepped out onto the porch and checked the camera feed. In one corner of the porch, Shadow moved a man in a black jacket and hood, staring up at the roof for a few seconds before walking away. I zoomed in. The shape, the posture. Ethan. He'd been here. And he wanted me to know. I went to the safe, opened the old metal box inside. My Air Force dog tag lay on top, the steel worn thin over time, H. Collins, USAF, OPOS. Beside it, a photo of Elena on our wedding day. Plain white dress, wind lifting her hair, eyes calm, fearless. I placed her letter beside it and locked the box. Then I wrote in my log, Octa 19, drone surveillance. Ethan spotted. They're collecting evidence to destroy my credibility. Night fell. The wind carried damp air through the pines behind the house, a soft roar like waves from somewhere far away. I sat at the desk, coffee steaming beside me. The sound of the spoon stirring matched my heartbeat, slow, deliberate, disciplined. Elena once said, "You don't have to be strong all the time, just don't fall." I looked at her picture and murmured, "I haven't fallen. Elena. But maybe it's time I fight one last time for both of us." Close to midnight, a small noise broke the quiet, a soft scrape near the front door. Then silence. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. On the porch steps, half soaked from rain, lay an envelope. I tore it open. Inside, one printed sheet. No signature. No seal. Black letters. Short. Measured. "We're taking the house with or without you." And beneath it, one final line that you knew how to take off, Dad. "Let's see if you can land." I stood under the eaves, rain pattering against the roof, ink bleeding into the paper. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, the scent right before something breaks. I folded the note and placed it beside Elena's letter. If this was a declaration of war, I was ready. "I know how to take off," I said quietly. "And this time, I'll choose where I land. In the Air Force, every mission began the same way, with a map, a plan, and one unspoken assumption: no one is coming to save you. That rule kept me alive once. And now, I was back in mission mode. October 22nd, 2024. I woke before dawn. The first light of morning cut through the blinds, falling across the worn wooden floor like a pale wound. On the kitchen table, I spread a blank sheet of paper and picked up a pencil. Line by line, I sketched the layout of the house: every door, every exit, every shadowed corner I knew by heart. Each position had a symbol: cameras, outlets, hidden microphones, lighting angles. Not out of fear, out of control. When you fly, you learn this: if you know where the wind comes from, the storm will never surprise you. Now the only difference was that my sky had turned into a roof. 3 days later, I started charting Tara's movements. Every visit, every excuse, every touch. October 25th, 10:14 a.m. Tara entered the kitchen, stayed 7 minutes carrying a large handbag. October 28th, 4:02 p.m. She went straight upstairs, opened Elena's room, stared at the photo frame for 6 seconds. November 1st, 9:38 a.m. She paused in the garage, pretending to make a phone call, while the porch camera caught her opening the tool cabinet. I logged everything: precise, detached, clinical. No emotion, no judgment, only data. By the first week of November, I moved to Phase 2. I found an old Android phone from my maintenance days, installed a stealth recorder, set it to activate automatically. I hid it in the garage, Tara's favorite accidental detour. When the screen went dark, I whispered into the tiny lens: recording initiated. Mission active. That night I called Barbara. After listening to the plan, she was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You're doing the right thing. I'll handle the legal end." 3 days later, I drove to Portland to sign the documents. Barbara slid a folder across her desk. Irrevocable Trust Agreement, Bend Education Foundation. She explained, her tone measured and calm: the house will transfer to the foundation, value $780,000. You retain lifetime residency. No one, not even your son, can sell or mortgage it. After you pass it, funds the Elena Collins Scholarship. I stayed silent, not from doubt, but from something deeper: gratitude and grief. "You're certain?" I asked. "Absolutely legal," she said. "And if they're watching, let them see you sign it. The more witnesses, the harder it is to rewrite the truth." I smiled faintly. A clean operation, no weapons required. November 9th, 2024. Wind battered Bend. The sky hung heavy like lead, waiting to crack. I checked everything again. Cameras online. Laptop encrypted. External drive containing full financial backups. No clouds. No email. Everything stored in an AES 256 encrypted drive hidden behind the basement circuit board. Only I knew the password. I wrote in the logbook: 1/9/11, mission ready. House secured. Data protected. They can't steal what's already locked in truth. November 10th, 2024. Early morning. A cold wind swept through the neighborhood. The porch light flickered once, then died. From the living room, I heard the soft chime of my laptop: new audio file detected, garage recorder. I plugged in my headphones. Static at first. Then voices, distant, muffled, but clear enough. Tara's voice. Short. Urgent. A whisper meant not to be heard. "Are you sure those pills are worth the $400? I don't want him waking up." Ethan's voice followed, low, calm, dangerous. "Just a few tablets. Everyone knows he's got a weak heart. We're just speeding up the inevitable." Then silence. A Russell plastic bag bottle cap. I stopped the playback. My spine went cold. No more guessing. No more pretending. They were planning to kill me. I played it again, then again, then a third time until every syllable burned itself into my memory. And at the end, barely audible beneath the rain, once it's done, we sell the house. No one's gonna ask. He's old, alone, nobody cares. I sat there for a long time. No anger, no shock, just the slow, spreading chill of clarity. I'd watched men burn alive in midair. I'd seen good people vanish without a trace. But never, not once, had betrayal sounded this intimate. At sunrise, I drove to Portland. Barbara listened to the entire recording. Her expression didn't change. When it ended, she folded her hands and said quietly, "Henry, this is direct evidence. This isn't just financial exploitation. This is attempted homicide. You need to leave the house. I'll contact the Elder Crime Unit immediately." I shook my head. "No, I won't run. This is my home. I won't abandon it out of fear." She studied me for a long time, then said, "All right. But let me prepare contingencies. If they make a move, I'll have everything ready for the court. You just have to do one thing, stay alive long enough." I gave a thin smile. "I've flown through enemy territory without radar, Ms. Lindstrom. Survival's a reflex. And I'm still flying." That night I drove back to Bend. The wind had gone still, the sky black as a steel curtain. I sat in the living room, eyes on the window. The neighborhood was silent, too silent. I could hear the wind hissing faintly through the chimney. On the table lay the signed transfer to the Bend Education Foundation. Beside it, my coffee cup. I picked up my pen and wrote one line in the notebook. "When a pilot loses radar, he flies by instinct. I fly by justice." 2317. A faint ping garage motion alert. I opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life, dark shapes, faint light. A flashlight beam swept across the garage. Tara. In her hand, a small brown pill bottle. Next to her, Ethan stood by the door, whispering, "Hurry. One dose and it's done." I hit record screen, took a slow breath. My voice came out low, steady, the same tone I used before every mission confirmed. Target identified. And this time, I'm the one watching. They say every family has one meal after which no one is ever the same. For me, that meal was Thanksgiving 2024. November 28th, 2024. Bend, Oregon. The air was cold and dry, the sky a clear sheet of glass after a night of rain. I woke at 5 a.m., turned on the radio, and let the soft crackle of old jazz drift through the kitchen. On the counter lay the grocery receipt from the day before, nearly $400 for a single dinner, an 18-pound turkey cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, a bottle of red wine, and an old bourbon Ethan used to like. I did everything as if it were just another Thanksgiving. But there was nothing normal about that house anymore. Every knife, every glass, every look, any of them could become a weapon or evidence. At 8:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Barbara, the foundation filing went through. The house at Collins Drive is now property of the Bend Education Foundation. You retain lifetime residency. Happy Thanksgiving. Henry. I read it 3 times, then smiled. Every word felt like another brick in the wall I'd rebuilt to protect myself. Whatever they did now, they could never take the house. I poured coffee and stood by the window. Snow fell lightly. On a pine branch, a sparrow perched still, its head tilted as if listening. I thought of Elena. She used to say Thanksgiving isn't about what you've lost. It's about what's left. I whispered back, I'm still here, Elena. And I'll keep my promise. I'll protect this place till my last breath. 2:15 p.m. Tires crunched over the driveway gravel. Ethan stepped out first, neat suit holding flowers. Tara followed, long coat, oversized handbag. They smiled, warm and practiced, like the last few months hadn't been built on betrayal. Dad, you look better, Ethan said, voice lined with fake affection. I'm trying, I replied. Come in. The turkey's almost done. They crossed the threshold, the smell of food thick in the air. Tara glanced around. Wow, you made all this yourself? Looks like something from a magazine. I smiled but didn't answer. Instead, I watched. Her hand trembled slightly as she set her bag down, the tiny tremor of someone about to do something wrong. While I fetched the plates, Tara opened the wine. Ethan chatted about work. I half listened, my eyes fixed on her reflection in the window glass. She poured 3 glasses. And then I saw it, not directly, but in the reflection of my vintage pilot's watch. She bent down slightly. Something white powdered slipped from her fingers into my glass. A quick motion, efficient, confident. She set the glass down and turned away. I inhaled slowly, held the air steady in my chest. Then I switched the glasses. A small, natural movement, just rearranging the table. My glass, hers, swapped. No one noticed. We sat. Candlelight glimmered off 3 faces that no longer belonged to the same family. Ethan raised his glass first. To family. Tara smiled, clinking hers. I lifted mine, last voice low, deliberate, every syllable sharp as glass. May we all get what we deserve. The glasses met with a cold clink like metal striking stone. The wine shimmered under candlelight, dark red and heavy as blood. Tara drank first. Her lips quivered faintly. She didn't realize the glasses had been switched. I only sipped enough to keep the act alive. Dinner unfolded in polite, honey-coated tension. Ethan talked about a promotion in Portland. Tara described their dream home in West Hills. I nodded, asked lightly. So, moving soon, Ethan smiled. If everything goes well, right after Christmas. I met his gaze and returned the smile. Then I hope everything goes very well. 6:27 p.m. I cleared the table, pretending fatigue. Tired, going to rest upstairs. Ethan waved me off. Go ahead, Dad. We'll do the dishes. Halfway up the stairs, I stopped, staying in the shadows. From above, I could see them in the kitchen. Tara leaned on the counter, whispering, Do you think he suspects? Ethan shook his head. No. Half an hour and it's done. I retreated silently. In my room, I opened the hidden outlet camera feed. Every frame, every word streamed directly to Barbara's secure server in Portland. 7:02 p.m. Footsteps downstairs, quick, uneven. Then a crash. A glass hit the floor. Ethan's panicked voice broke through. Tara, Tara. I rose, calm, descended each step deliberately. In the kitchen, the scene was painted in red. A spilled glass, liquid spreading across the tile like a dark vein. Tara on the floor, eyes wide, lips trembling, breath short. Ethan knelt beside her, voice shaking. Call 911. Dad, do something. I looked around, the flickering light, the overturned chair, the reflection of 3 people bound by silence and consequence. I walked closer, steady, like inspecting a damaged aircraft. Calm down, Ethan. I already called. I hadn't. No one was coming. Only truth rising slowly to the surface, just like the poison they'd mixed. I knelt beside him, my voice even almost gentle. Ethan, do you know why I switched the glasses? He froze. His eyes widened, searching my face. I placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but not cruel, because I saw it, and because I learned a long time ago, never drink what someone else pours. His pupils dilated, fear, disbelief, realization. For a second I saw both of us clearly, two men from the same bloodline, one who fought to survive and one who fought only to take. I stood turning away from the chaos behind me. Ethan screamed, glass shattered, a choked gasp, a plea for help that came too late. I didn't look back. I just said quietly as I walked out of the kitchen, may we all get what we deserve. They say war ends when the last bullet is fired, but in real life it ends the moment truth explodes, and no one can deny it anymore. 7:10 p.m. Tara's scream tore through the kitchen. Ethan was on the floor, convulsing, his face pale blue, the spilled wine spreading across the tiles like diluted blood. Tara dropped to her knees, shaking him, her voice cracking into pieces. Ethan. Ethan, what's happening? Get up! I stood a few steps away, motionless. The yellow light from the chandelier flickered across their faces, one trembling, one collapsing, and one just watching. Outside, rain whispered against the roof. Then, amid the chaos, the doorbell rang. A sharp, steady rhythm. Once. Twice. Tara's head jerked up. Who's there? I looked at my watch. 7:12 p.m. Right on time. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing under the porch light was Barbara Lindstrom in a long coat, a file case under her arm. Beside her, two Bend PD officers and a woman in a black blazer with a foundation badge, Julia Thompson, Bend Education Foundation. Barbara spoke first, calm and precise, as if she were simply arriving for a scheduled meeting. We received a call from Attorney Collins about a property inspection related to the Foundation's filing. Looks like we came just in time. Tara backed away, pale and shaking. What are you people doing here? Barbara stepped inside, gesturing to the officers. One knelt beside Ethan to check his pulse. The other scanned the room, his eyes landing on the wine bottle and a small brown prescription vial on the table. What's this? He asked. I answered slowly, voice low but steady. What they meant for me to drink. Just then, Arjorie Lane, my neighbor, appeared at the door, her hand holding up a phone camera recording. I heard screaming, she said, breathless but firm. My porch cam caught both of them entering the house at 2:15. Barbara turned to her, nodding. Perfect. Keep that footage, we'll need it for the case. Ethan lay still, breathing weakly. The officer lifted the vial, reading the label aloud. Diazepam 10 mg prescription only. One tablet still glistened with traces of wine. He looked at Tara. Ma'am, is this yours? She stammered, voice shaking. No. I don't know what that is. Barbara opened her briefcase and slid a printed receipt onto the table. Visa card ending in 7182, Tara Collins. $380 purchase at Bend Pharmacy. November 25th, the medication matches the one in your hand. The room went still. The officers exchanged a look. One pulled on gloves, carefully collecting the evidence. Tara collapsed into a chair, tears streaking down her face. No. He switched the glasses, he switched them. I met her eyes, calm, quiet, like describing the weather. He only drank what you both prepared for me. No shouting, no anger. Just truth, sharp and absolute. Ethan was taken out on a stretcher. The medic said he'd survive, but the poisoning was serious. Tara was cuffed. Her cries echoing through the hallway as the officers led her out. You planned this, you and Barbara and that foundation. You ruined us. I didn't respond. I just watched the red and blue lights reflect across the wooden walls, colors flashing like the final storm breaking apart, leaving only the silence after battle. Inside, Barbara organized her files while Julia reviewed the documents. She signed one final page and said, "This property now officially belongs to the Bend Education Foundation, with lifetime residency retained by Mr. Collins. No further disputes are possible. The recordings, the audio logs, and Ms. Lane's footage will all be submitted to the district attorney." Barbara turned to me, eyes tired but soft. "You know, Henry, I told you once greed always creates its own weak spot. Tonight, it destroyed them." I replied quietly, "I didn't do anything, Barbara. I just let them drink what they'd already poured." Marjorie sank into a chair, her hands still trembling around the teacup I handed her. "Told you, didn't I? If they want the house, they'll try everything. But I never thought they'd be dumb enough to tighten the noose on themselves." I smiled faintly. Sometimes justice doesn't need to shout, Marjorie. It just needs to show up on time. When the police left, silence filled the house again. Only the scent of wine lingered, sweet and heavy, mixed with the faint smoke from the fireplace. I sat down and looked around. Everything was where it had been, yet something had shifted. A weight lifted, a dignity restored. Barbara gathered her papers. "I'll stay the night," she offered. "You shouldn't be alone." I shook my head. "Go home. I've lived through worse nights. And if anyone comes back, they'll find me right here on duty." She hesitated at the door, then turned. "You once told me in the Air Force you don't call for backup just because you hear thunder. But tonight, Henry, you called at the right time. Elena would be proud." I looked toward the porch where snow had started falling, thick and slow. She was the one who taught me how to keep my heading. A week later, the story made the local news. Couple in Bend charged with attempted murder and fraud, accused of plotting to kill father for nearly $1 million in assets. Police recovered sedatives, camera footage, and key witness testimony. My name appeared on screen, small text beneath the headline, "Henry Collins, survivor, retired Air Force veteran." I turned off the TV and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the wind chimes on the porch sang softly, the same chimes Marjorie had given me, the same ones that had recorded the proof of everything. I glanced at the window, snow blanketing the porch, and a faint red stain still marking the kitchen floor, the trace of guilt now laid bare. My voice broke the quiet, low and steady, like a pilot signing his final report. "I've flown through storms before. I just never thought the last one would carry my own name." I lifted my coffee, watched the steam curl upward, and smiled faintly. And in the end, everyone got exactly what they deserved. There's one thing I learned in the Air Force, in the sky. There's no room for lies. One wrong number, one false word, and someone goes down. Turns out the ground isn't much different. Early December 2024. The news broke fast, headlines everywhere: attempted poisoning of retired Air Force veteran in Bend. My name was printed on every page, but pride was the last thing I felt. Only emptiness. The kind that comes after a landing where no one else made it home. Ethan survived. Tara was in custody. And me. I was just waiting for the truth to stand under daylight. February 2nd, 2025. Deschutes County Courthouse, Bend, Oregon. Public hearing. The State of Oregon versus Ethan Collins. Charges: attempted poisoning, elder abuse, fraudulent loan application, and conspiracy to defraud. The courtroom was small, fluorescent lights buzzing above faces, tight with anticipation. Barbara sat beside me, a thick stack of files before her, each one a fragment of the justice we'd built piece by piece. Across the aisle sat Ethan, thinner, paler, his wrists still bandaged. but his eyes still carried that trace of arrogance, like a man who believed he could outfly gravity. The prosecutor, a woman with steady brown eyes, spoke clearly. On November 28th, the defendant Ethan Collins, along with his wife Tara Collins, knowingly mixed sedatives into a glass of wine belonging to his father, Mr. Henry Collins, age 68, with the intent to seize assets totaling nearly $1 million. The goal to obtain property ownership and financial documents to secure a $250,000 fraudulent loan. The room fell silent. Her voice cut through the air, cold, exact, military in rhythm. Thanks to evidence gathered by Mr. Collins and attorney Barbara Lindstrom, the act was stopped before it became a homicide. I looked at my son. He avoided my eyes, tapping his finger against the table, a habit he had as a boy, while waiting for me to sign his school awards. Barbara stood. I'd never seen her so sharp, so composed. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word was honed like steel. Exhibit A, the audio recording from the garage. November 10th, 2024. She pressed play. Tara's voice filled the courtroom, trembling through the speakers. Are you sure that $400 worth of pills is worth it? I don't want him waking up. A few people in the gallery looked down. Exhibit B, loan application for $250,000. Submitted to Bend First Bank, signed under the forged name Henry L. Collins, traced to the IP address registered under the defendant's network. She placed the printed bank logs on the evidence table. Exhibit C, porch camera footage from neighbor Marjorie Lane showing the defendant and his wife leaving the property at 7:05 p.m., carrying the same prescription bottle found at the scene. Then the final blow. And lastly, documentation from the Bend Education Foundation confirming the property had been transferred 24 hours before the incident, meaning even if their plan had succeeded, they would never have owned the house. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's head dropped. His hands clenched, tight knuckles pale. I saw it, not guilt, not yet, but the dawning realization that every move he'd made had led him straight into his own trap. The defense lawyer tried to recover. My client suffered from financial stress and psychological instability. There was no intent of serious harm. Barbara cut in calm, precise, merciless, Your Honor. A man who served his country for 22 years, who lost his wife and spent his life working for his family, does not deserve to hear his son say, after Thanksgiving, he won't make it. She said it slowly, each syllable landing like a hammer. Ethan snapped. He stood shouting, You chose your honor over your own son. The room froze. All eyes turned toward me. I rose, adjusted my tie, and stepped to the stand. My voice came out steady, measured, quiet, but with the weight of every mile I'd flown. Honor is what kept me alive through things you'll only ever read about, son. When my brothers fell from the sky, I didn't look away. When life broke me down, I stood back up because I still had this left. Honor. I looked straight at him. But you, Ethan, you sold it. And the price you put on it wasn't even worth this house. His body trembled, not with rage, but with the realization that there was nothing left to say. The judge struck the gavel. The defendant, Ethan Collins, is found guilty of attempted poisoning and fraudulent loan application. Sentenced to 5 years probation, 3 years supervised release, and 200 hours of community service at the Bend Veterans Home. Tara's sentence was harsher, 18 months in county jail. The courtroom doors closed behind them, and in that moment, I watched a generation end. Afterward, Barbara placed a hand on my shoulder. You all right? I nodded slowly. I'm fine. Just disappointed. I thought I could teach him what it meant to be a man. But some lessons, you only learn when you've lost everything. she sighed. At least you kept what mattered yourself. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. A reporter called out, "Mr. Collins, do you regret taking your son to court?" I stopped, looked straight into the lens. No, I only regret not teaching him sooner that honesty is worth more than a $780,000 house. That afternoon, I returned to the house on Collins Drive. The door was open, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor, and the framed photo of Elena. The wind stirred her old Air Force medal hanging beside the picture. I touched it gently. I kept my promise, Elena. No one stained what we built. Outside, Barbara stood with Julia Thompson discussing plans to convert the living room into a volunteer meeting space. The Elena Collins Memorial Scholarship Fund had just been approved. I sat on the porch watching the pale gray sky, my voice slow and steady like a closing narration over static radio. Justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from that moment you look your betrayer in the eye and realize you don't hate them anymore. A cold wind swept through, carrying the scent of pine and fresh snow. I smiled faintly. I survived the war, and today, I survived my own family. People think revenge is an ending, but it isn't. It's just the beginning of a silence, the kind that lasts longer than any sentence. June 2025. Summer came late to Bend that year. Every morning, mist clung to the distant rows of pines like a secret that wouldn't lift. I woke early, made coffee, and stood on the porch. The first rays of sunlight brushed over the old roof tiles, turning them gold like dust from old memories. The radio hummed quietly inside, reading the morning news. Final sentencing in the Collins case. Ethan Collins, 35, receives a 2-year suspended sentence and 400 hours of community service at the Bend Veterans Home. Tara Collins placed on 5 years probation, prohibited from contacting the victim. The couple declared bankrupt following the forfeiture of their $250,000 fraudulent loan. The announcer's voice was flat and factual, but to me, every number struck like metal on metal, cold, precise, and permanent. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a kind of emptiness. The kind a pilot feels after landing from a mission alive, but realizing the rest of the crew didn't make it back. That afternoon, Barbara came by. She carried a file folder from the foundation and a thick envelope. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she still managed a small smile. "Just came from court," she said. "It's all done." She sat beside me on the porch, her gaze drifting toward the lavender garden Elena once planted. "Henry," she said softly, "you didn't just save your house. You saved them from destroying themselves." I let out a quiet laugh. "Saved them? You really think I did that?" She nodded. "Ethan's been mopping floors at the Veterans Home. Every day he meets men who once wore the same uniform you did. Maybe for the first time he's learning what honor means." I didn't answer. The wind stirred the lavender, spreading its faint perfume through the afternoon air. Maybe I murmured, "We all need a storm to remember who we used to be." 3 days later, the mailman left a yellow envelope in my box. The top corner read, "Deschutes County Correctional Facility." I didn't need to check the sender. The handwriting uneven but familiar. Ethan Collins. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Dad, I don't know where to start. Every morning here I clean the hallways and make beds for the old veterans. They tell stories about the Air Force, about their brothers, about honor, about never leaving a man behind, no matter how bad it gets. I realized I left that behind long ago. I used to be proud of being your son, a pilot's son, but I forgot what that really meant. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just hope that one day you can say, My son has learned how to stand tall again. At the bottom, his signature shook slightly. Ethan. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Elena's, the one I'd kept in the wooden box all these years. 2 letters. 2 voices. 2 worlds. One from the woman who left and one from the son who almost did. And sitting there, I could almost hear them talking to each other across time. When the world makes you forget who you are, remember you once knew how to fly. Elena. I forgot what that meant. Ethan. Between those 2 sentences, I realized maybe this was fate's way of making amends. That evening, Barbara returned with a new proposal. The Foundation's launching a program, Veterans Teaching Veterans. They want you to speak about resilience, about how you made it through. I smiled faintly. Barbara. I'm just an old man who managed to keep his house. She shook her head. No, Henry. You're proof that a man can keep himself. I said nothing. Just looked out the window where sunlight filtered through the pines, leaving golden patches on the worn wooden floor. I thought of Elena's voice those late afternoons, when she'd remind me honor isn't something people give you. It's what you hold on to even when no one's watching. That night I took both letters, Elena's and Ethan's, and laid them side by side on the table. Then I picked up a pen and wrote one simple word across a new envelope, forgiven. Not because they earned it, but because I needed to be free. The next morning I drove to the cemetery where Elena rested. The grass was green, the wind gentle sparrows fluttering above her stone. I laid the envelope beneath her photo and whispered, I kept the house, Elena. But more than that, I kept our promise. A soft breeze passed. A few lavender petals drifted down, landing over the carved words. She taught him to fly. I smiled not out of joy, but because I finally understood what landing felt like. On the way home, I stopped by the Bend Veterans Home. Out in the courtyard, Ethan was helping an elderly veteran in a wheelchair, his shirt darkened with sweat under the sun. He didn't see me. I just stood there, not bitter, not proud, simply still. My phone rang. Barbara's voice. Where are you, Henry? Somewhere justice doesn't look like a courtroom. I'm guessing you're watching him. Yeah. He's learning to fly again, only this time on the ground. Her voice softened. Do you think you've really forgiven him? No, I said. But I've learned how not to hate. By the time I got home, dusk had settled over the town. The porch glowed under red evening light. The lavender swayed in the wind. I turned on the lamp, poured myself a glass of whiskey. Not to forget, but to remember. My voice echoed softly in the still air, like a final debrief at the end of a long flight. I spent my life fighting to survive. But forgiveness, that's the hardest mission of all. War taught me how to fly. Elena taught me how to love. And Ethan taught me that sometimes silence is the greatest lesson. I looked out at the night sky. A small plane crossed above, leaving a thin silver trail. Its red light blinked gently in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. I'm still flying, Elena. Only now, I'm no longer afraid to land. November 2025. Bend, Oregon. Snow had been falling since dawn, dusting the rooftops and porch steps in a thin, fragile layer. The wind came down from the Cascades, cold and deliberate, threading through the tall pines and tapping against the window glass, a winter reminder that even what once froze can be warmed again. Inside a modest brick building with a brass plaque reading, The Elena Collins Project, Veterans Youth Workshop, I stood before a dozen young faces, all recently discharged veterans. The room glowed with morning light. They listened as I spoke about the one truth it had taken me most of a lifetime to understand. Honor doesn't die when the war ends. I walked slowly between the rows of chairs. My voice wasn't that of a teacher. It was the voice of a man who had flown through storms and lived to tell about them. I'm not here to teach you how to be strong, I said. I'm here to remind you that sometimes strength means knowing when to stop before you lose yourself. Behind me, the Foundation's logo shone on the projector screen alongside the caption, Grant, $75,000. Bend Education Foundation, 2025. Barbara once told me not everyone gets the chance to turn loss into value. She was right. The pain of last year, those nights standing in front of the house I thought I'd lost, had somehow become the foundation for what we were building now. A young man raised his hand. His name was Ryan Porter, 24, former Air Force Nebraska unit. His eyes were bright, but behind them was that same confusion I once knew too well. Sir, he asked, if one day someone you love betrays your trust, could you ever forgive them? The room went still. I smiled faintly, stepped closer, and spoke slow, clear, and low so they could all hear it. I used to think forgiveness was weakness. But I've learned forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about refusing to let someone else define who you are. If you stay true to yourself, if you keep your heading, then the betrayer has already lost, even if you never say a word. Ryan nodded, eyes down. In his face, I saw the man I used to be, someone who thought he'd lost everything, but still had the one thing that mattered most, dignity. During the break, I stepped into the hallway. Light reflected off the windows, snow falling soft outside. From my coat pocket, I took out my old pilot's watch, scratched face-worn leather strap. That watch had once reflected the moment I saw Tara grind pills into a glass of wine. It had once marked betrayal. Today, it was about to mark something else. Back in the classroom, I called Ryan to the front. You're the first recipient of this year's scholarship, I told him. I took off the watch and placed it in his hands. This watch once helped me see betrayal, I said, meeting his eyes. Now I want it to help you see opportunity. Not everyone gets a chance to begin again, Ryan. When you do, don't waste it. Ryan nodded, gripping the watch tightly. Tears glimmered in his eyes. The room was silent, only the soft sound of snow against the windows. Then the door opened. Barbara walked in, brushing off the flakes from her coat, smiling as she held up a letter. News from the Foundation, they've just increased your program's funding by another $50,000. They said the results are too good to stop now. I smiled, glancing toward the window where the American flag rippled in the wind. Maybe I said honor still has a place in this world, Barbara. She smiled back. Not just a place, it's being passed on. That afternoon, after the workshop, I drove home. The road was quiet snow blanketing both sides, the sunset painting everything in gold. I turned on the radio. Moon River played the same song Elena used to hum when we drove home after her night shifts. In the rearview mirror, I caught my reflection, older, slower, but with the same steady glint in my eyes. The look of a man who finally knew he'd stayed on course. When I pulled up to the house, I looked toward the porch. The flag waved softly beside a wooden sign that read, "The Collins Home, a house built on honor." A house that had almost been lost now, a place that taught others what honor truly meant. That evening, Barbara stopped by for dinner. She brought pumpkin pie. I poured mulled wine. We sat by the fireplace, the light flickering against Elena's photograph on the wall. She'd be proud, Barbara said quietly, of this program and of you. I looked at the photo. Elena always believed in healing. I believed in discipline. Now I see you need both. Because honor isn't just about never falling. It's about standing up without hatred. Barbara nodded. That's something America keeps forgetting. Henry doing the right thing even when no one's watching. I smiled, eyes on the fire. Then we'll keep doing it until they start watching again. When she left, I stepped onto the porch. Snow was falling harder now. The streetlights glowed against the flag, its colors deep in the cold air. I stood there, hands in my pockets, alone, but not lonely. Someone once asked me the difference between justice and revenge, I said quietly. I told them revenge ends with a scream, but justice ends in peace. I lifted my eyes to the bend sky, snow swirling under the faint light of a passing plane. Its trail stretched long and silver like a scar across the night. That light caught in my eyes the light of a man who once lost his way and found his flight path again. If you still believe that silence can be justice and that honor never truly dies, tell me where you're watching from. Do you think Henry chose right justice over revenge? Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories, where truth speaks softly but never disappears.